It's the next day. I likely freaked some people out because I ran out in shorts and a t-shirt in the snow, and there was a tree that fell down and was blocking a path, and so I killed two birds with one stone. I moved it out of the way and I took a piece of it back. So this is wide enough that I can start practicing making tenons for the house. I had to carry it back on the way, and little kids are calling out to me, "How strange! There's a half-naked man walking with a log through the forest." And it looked strange, I'm sure, but I'm really happy with the loot. I and there's more of it if I can just carry it on my back, because it's a little distance. I'm back in the workshop. Yesterday, I cleaned this place up a little bit so that there's a lot more space. There's stuff behind me. And what I'm working on now is this. So I already chopped up the sides. I'm gonna clean up this end with a draw knife and then flatten it out on the other side. And then I can start cutting out the joints. So I got carried away with life the rest of the day, and I cleaned it up since then just a little bit, but now I'm back to try to do the other end. I'm gonna try to get the log scriber working today. This is all cleaned, and this is how much shavings end up from a log like this. This would be good compost if I had somewhere to put it. So it's the next day. I got these 4 logs chopped into about 54 centimeter blocks, and now I'm going to learn how to use this thing. This is a log scriber or a transfer scriber, and it's used to... So here I made a little temporary scribe pod to hold the log in place. And now I've got the log scriber calibrated. This is what the progress is starting to look like. Getting this side down. And I realize I'm gonna have to practice a lot more with the transfer scribe because it's kind of tricky getting these lines. I sort of got them here down, and I'm semi-eyeballed it. I got the main shape down, and I'm gonna play around, and the tricky part is getting the part that fits into it. So here's my first one. None tomorrow. I don't have time today. Tomorrow, once I have time, I'm gonna cut the, the inverse of this. This morning, I had a friend sleep over, and I normally do some 20 minutes of exercise in the morning. It's just some jumping jacks. But I figured instead of waking him up, I would go and go run in the forest with another log. And so I I brought this bag. It's it almost killed me bringing it here. It's really freaking heavy. It's at least a meter and a half, maybe even 2 meters of what was below this, and yeah, it's quite a bit chunkier. It's quite a big tree. So it's quite a bit later now. I'm getting started on the second piece. This will fit with this, so I'm cutting out the gap. This is tricky, getting the two pieces to fit. I made this very long, and I'm going to widen this up. There's going to be a lot of work afterwards once they're into each other to clean up the edges, because this is a very rough first sketch. So I spilled some blood. It's crazy how sharp the chisels are. Anyways, as you can see, I need some more practice. This came at a crazy sharp angle, kept getting wider and wider. And yeah, it's this pattern, it's not holding as tight, although it does seem to get in there. Got a little update here. So these are the pear seeds I planted on 9/20, and today is almost exactly 3 months afterwards, and it's amazing to see how this is actually working. They're actually sprouting. This is what I did yesterday. It holds semi. With a bit of a shake, it comes loose. So I'm going to start with these bigger logs, but instead of aiming for something complex like this, I'm gonna go for something simpler. And so the first thing here, I'm creating a scribe pod. It's a replacement instead of this device here, which holds the two logs in place. So I'm gonna try to make my own, and I'm measuring it out so that if I need to make several, they can all be the same. So I had quite a bit of trouble figuring out how to set this back up. I had to watch a YouTube video because it's a little complicated if you don't know how to do it. I got it set up and I flattened this piece down a little bit on both edges. I'm going to make another scribe pod. Something similar to this, but I'm going to chop this in two pieces and have it go like an X and crosswise so that it can hold better than this dinky thing. So it took a while, but this is my adjustable scribe pod. So let's see how it works. Alright, I think I figured out how to use this thing. I've got pretty consistent markings here and here. Couldn't get the action shot, but I got this halfway cleaned out. I'm feeling very confident about this. I marked it out beforehand. Then I sawed the depth out for the next part, which I have to trim this part off so that it can look similar to that. So it's Saturday, the next day. My days aren't very different from one another, only that I don't have to do freelance on the weekend. Today I got to organizing. Here's the workbench, and it doesn't look much different before because I was too embarrassed to show what was in here. It was a mess. It was a bunch of stuff that I packed into a box over there. And I decided to connect to make the more organized workspace. So the original hole was in here, and whoever here drilled them before, I don't know. I tried to drill a new hole, but I drilled with. I realized you should drill with a smaller drill bit because then it gets so big. So I did a few more, and I learned how to fit this onto drywall. And I'm searching through my trash, my dump bin, and seeing what I could use to hang certain things. These things with the big round holes, they fit nicely through a typical screw, but many of these other things, like you don't fit through you. So as a result, I found two hairpins. I drilled a hole and I found some scrap wood from the floor. I shaved it into a wedge, and it works pretty good to hold these. But I don't have any more hairpins, and I'm looking for something else. So I have these nails. Maybe I can drill a hole through and see what happens. Here, finally got some order into this place. No more overflowing desk. Cleaned out the crap. Still gotta reorganize the bottom area. However, everything's hanging. I got another hole into the wall to support this thing because it's a little wobbly. Here's my second junction, and it's pretty good. I'm really happy compared to the first one. There's this one side here. It could be tighter. I realized I didn't make all the parts symmetrical. And so next time I'm gonna measure it out better. But this, it's sturdy. It holds together really well. So my phone died before I finished, as far as I got yesterday. So it's about mostly cleaned up. There's only spots underneath here. Now the hard work is cutting it after it's had a chance to dry out in the snow. It seems like it was easier to cut out there, whereas here it gets stuck really easily. So then afterwards, on to more practicing. Since there's very little information on how to use this thing on the web, I'm basically fumbling, trying to figure out how to use it, and I'm learning some things along the way, and I figured I'd add some of the documentation to it and stuff that I can add up as I go along and learn more things so I can have these lessons in one place. For one is learning how to set this thing up. The most important thing about it is to get the contour of the side of the log that you want to get into the other log. So it all depends on the depth, how deep of the side you want to go in, because as you go further out this way, it gets wider, and the more you have to take off from here. And so in my case, I'm trying to get this pretty deep in here because I'm going to get it set somewhat level to this if possible. So I went up and I drew the sides as high as possible. But first, let's get into how did I go about doing that. This guy is unique in that on one head it has a pencil marker, and on the other head, I guess I could always also put a pencil head and draw at the same time. However, what sets it apart from a protractor is these bubbles, which make sure that I'm aligned on the x-axis and on the y-axis, so that when I draw a line, it's perpendicular both sides. There's a mark up top here, and there's where the pen goes in. So what's important is that when I draw a line while being perfectly equal, it's hard to do that now in film. Anyways, it takes practice to get it. But once that's set up that way, once you flip this head around so that it's you can draw on the other side, it should draw at the exact same point. Now, I can't see, but yeah, it's basically the bubbles in the center here, and the bubble is centered here. So that when I draw a line onto both sides, or onto both logs, I know that it's a direct match or an imprint. The tricks I've learned is to create this log holder, which it gives me a pretty consistent height to draw between the two logs. However, I noticed when I'm cutting the logs, it's better to have the area in which the log scriber is working in cleaned off, because here there's this huge bump, as you can see, and it gets in the way of the log scriber in this position. I'm trying to get it equal, but this thing is bugging. I just went ahead and cleaned this bump off so that this can reach easier. Here, I made a little improvement to my scribe pod because it keeps wanting to fall over. So this is my 5th go at this, just because I erased it. I decided to draw it over since I couldn't get all the way around it. So now what I realize is that once I get it in position, I don't want to have to redraw it because I still haven't figured out how to realign to previously started maps. So it's best to get it so that you can get all around it, and that these pencil jabs, they stick into each side. And as it comes to drawing it, I realize it's easier to go in certain directions, so using gravity. So if I draw like so in a single direction going down the grain, it's pretty smooth. But now as I start getting closer to here and I start going against the grain of this, I find it's easier to go to the side and go upwards. All right, so got something right on here. And so now to do the same thing for all the other sides. Another important thing with this, check that it is aligned quite often because I'm using this Veritas here, and even if I tighten this piece down with enough force or a bump or something, it can knock it out. And try to get these ends to go outwards as much as possible. That is after you clean up any bumps that were previously there so that this can get in everywhere. And another trick is to stick things in underneath the scribe pod. So I added a wedge here, added some small wedges to the bottom here, so it won't move as much when I'm drawing. I just finished drawing it, and here's what I'm left with. I've got a pretty consistent squiggly lines going across both. Now starts the fun part, figuring out how I'm going to cut it. Now, I don't know what's the best way to go forward measuring how to get the depth. The last one I cut, I made so one side, this side is deeper than this side. And so how to make it level. That's what I'm working with now, trying to figure out. So unfortunately, I don't have enough battery on my phone to capture all this. However, I finished half of this. I'm doing this a bit more complex. As you can see there, I added a 2 centimeter step, and I put together this device. I got this depth gauge, and I combined it with these bubbles so that I could measure out exactly 3 centimeters here. So this is how I'm going about trying to get it more consistent, more exact. Every iteration is getting better. That's how I learned how to cut this so far. I realized that if I keep the top of this dead level, as in here, then I don't need a special contraption with this depth gauge. If it's level, then I can just match it based on the height of these sides. So I cut one side, I had to go back and clean out the other side because to level this down, I had to level this down, and then from there I could easily go and do this side. So I'm still figuring out the tips and tricks of how to do this quickest. Um, but let's do the next part. So I realized that if you're connecting two logs, you want to make sure that they're on the same plane. And I forgot to do that when I measured out um, with the log scriber, and I realized that I have this side drawn so that this would be hanging up something like that. So I'm gonna try to redraw this now so that this sits directly on top so that it's perpendicular. So it's taking me ages to draw this out, and I'm running in circles, but because I'm realizing that I need to make this whole thing symmetrical so that this depth on this side would equal the depth on that side, because until I do that, I cannot accurately draw this out. So now I'm going in and deepening this side. I'm finding this depth gauge is invaluable here. So I just deepen this other side. I found a nifty trick where I can use, if I know that this is level, then that means the ruler is level. That means I can take the depth gauge and level it onto here, onto the side, and then I can figure out how deep exactly to mark it. So that's how I figured out how deep to go here. Now I'll feel more confident. I can do the same depth on both sides of this new one. I feel pretty good about this. I measured each of these steps and I've marked out where I need to cut what. You can't see this here, but let's get to work. So here's it finally connected. I spent like another hour and a half just getting it tighter around the edges, and it's on pretty hard now. It could be improved and tightened in some places, but I think once you get a bore in and put a wedge in it, there's no way in hell that's coming loose.